Do you think that cracking jokes about your wife or your partner in a social setting makes you more likable? Do you think that makes you more of a man? If yes, then let me tell you something. It makes you less of a human being, let alone man. It's not cool to put your partner or loved one down at an expense of a joke. Even if people laugh, it's not funny. It's an insult hidden as a joke. Here's a scene that probably sounds familiar. You're at a dinner party or a work lunch or a family gathering or I don't know, some kind of social gathering. And someone, usually a man, makes a joke. Something like, "My wife said I never listened to her. At least I think that's what she said." Or, "Marriage is great. You get to argue with the same person for the rest of your life." Or the classic, "Why do I need GPS when my wife tells me where to go all the time?" Everyone laughs. The wife smiles, maybe awkwardly. The evening moves on. And yet, something happened in that room. Something small, but not nothing. Today, I want to talk about that something, that little something that happened in that room. Not to be humorless, not to police dinner table conversations, but because the research on this is clear, a little uncomfortable, and worth understanding. What looks like a harmless joke often isn't. And that's not my opinion. It's what the science of humor, relationships, and social norms has been showing us for the last 3 decades. Let's start with something foundational, because most conversations about humor treat it as one thing, funny or not, offensive or not. But the psychological research is far more precise than that. In 2003, Rod Martin and colleagues at the University of Western Ontario published what has become the most widely used framework for classifying humor in the literature. They developed the Humor Styles Questionnaire that was published in the Journal of Research in Personality. And it identifies 4 distinct styles of humor that people use in everyday life. Now, 2 of them are broadly beneficial: affiliative humor, that jokes that bring people together, create warmth, ease tension, and self enhancing humor, the ability to find something funny in your own situation, to laugh at the absurdities of life without needing a target. Both of these are associated with better psychological well being and stronger relationships. But 2 of them are broadly harmful: self defeating humor, making yourself the butt of the joke excessively, often to gain approval, and aggressive humor. Humor that denigrates, belittles, or mocks others, including those you are close to. What Martin and his colleagues found is significant. Both of the harmful styles, especially aggressive humor, are negatively associated with psychological well being and relationship health. And most importantly, in their research, men scored substantially higher than women on both of the potentially detrimental humor scales. The wife joke is not a category mistake. It has a name in the research. It is a form of aggressive humor, specifically a subcategory that relationship researchers call disparagement humor. Humor that works by belittling a target, in this case, a specific target, your partner. Jeffrey Hall is a communication researcher at the University of Kansas who has spent years studying the specific role of humor in romantic relationships. In 2017, he published a meta analysis in the journal Personal Relationships that combined 43 separate samples, that is more than 15,000 people, to look at the relationship between humor and relationship satisfaction. The findings are not subtle. All 6 types of positive humor in the dataset were positively associated with relationship satisfaction, and 4 of 5 types of negative humor were negatively associated with it. Partner perceived negative humor, meaning how the target of the joke experiences it, showed some of the largest effect sizes in the entire dataset. Hall had already examined this dynamic more closely in an earlier 2011 paper that was published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, titled simply, "Is It Something I Said?" He studied 106 couples and looked specifically at partner embarrassment as a function of humor style. The result was that aggressive humor by one partner was directly associated with embarrassment felt by the other. And here's the dimension of this that doesn't get spoken about enough. When one partner makes a joke about the other in a social setting, what's happening is not just a private transaction between two people, it is a public act. It involves an audience and it shapes something that is called the couple's relational face, their shared social identity, the way they appear and exist together in the eyes of others. And when you make a joke that positions your partner as the punchline, the nagging wife, the controlling spouse, the person you'd rather escape, you are not just expressing a private frustration through a safe outlet. You are performing a version of your relationship for the room. And the person being performed about is standing right there. Now, there's also a specific dynamic that makes these jokes particularly hard to address in the moment. The joke is cloaked in humor, and humor signals this is not serious, this is playful, there is no cause for reaction. And if the target protests, they become the problem. Humorless, thin skinned, unable to take a joke. The social structure of the joke itself disarms any response. Thomas Ford and Mark Ferguson at Western Carolina University and Western New England University, respectively, named this in a 2004 paper in Personality and Social Psychology Review. Disparagement humor creates what they call a norm of tolerance. The joke signals that criticism of the target, in this case your partner, women in general, the institution of marriage, is acceptable here. You can relax your guard, no one will object, and the person least able to object because objecting would make them look worse is the partner being joked about. The most common defense of this kind of humor is intent. I didn't mean anything by it. It's not serious. She knows I love her. We joke about everything. The research doesn't vindicate this defense. In 2008, Ford, Boxer, Armstrong, and Edel published a paper in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin that was titled More Than Just a Joke: The Prejudice-Releasing Function of Sexist Humor. And their experiments showed that exposure to disparagement humor doesn't just reflect existing negative attitudes, it releases them. It changes the social environment in a way that makes discriminatory behavior more likely afterward, not just in the person making the joke, but in those who hear it and laugh. This is called the prejudice-releasing function of disparagement humor. The joke works by taking attitudes that are usually kept in check by social norms of decency and signaling. Right now, in this context, those norms are relaxed. The result is not just a funny moment, it's a shift in what the room understands to be acceptable. A related study by Ford, Wenzel, and Lorien from 2001 in the European Journal of Social Psychology showed that people exposed to sexist humor, including jokes framing women as nagging, controlling, or burdensome, subsequently showed greater tolerance of sexist events. The joke didn't just entertain, it recalibrated. Now apply this to the couple in the room. The person making the joke may genuinely love their partner. Intent is not in the question, but the joke still operates on the audience. It still shifts norms. It still positions the partner as a legitimate target for that kind of comment. And it does this in a social context where the partner has no clean way to respond. There is also a cumulative dimension here that is easy to miss. Now, one joke is a small thing, but patterns of humor are habits. And the research on habits tells us that what we do repeatedly is what we become. If making jokes at your partner's expense in public becomes a regular, automatic social behavior, the way some people have a ready quip about their wife every time they're in a group, that pattern encodes something. It tells you something about how you privately frame your relationship, and it tells your partner something as well. John Gottman is a psychologist at the University of Washington. He spent decades running what his lab called the Love Lab. He brought couples in observed them, measured their physiology, and then followed them for years to see which marriages survived and which didn't. Now, in his 1992 paper in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, which was co authored with Robert Levinson at UC Berkeley, Gottman identified the communication patterns that most reliably predicted whether a couple would divorce. Now, this work was extended in a series of longitudinal studies through the 1990s, and what emerged was a list of 4 patterns. He called them the 4 Horsemen. The 4 are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. They form a cascade. So, criticism becomes habitual. Habitual criticism invites contempt. Contempt invites defensiveness. And defensiveness, unresolved, leads to stonewalling. Of the 4, contempt is the most predictive of dissolution. Now, contempt is communicating from a position of superiority through mockery, sarcasm, eye rolling, or belittling. It signals not just frustration but fundamental disrespect. And Gottman's research showed that chronic contempt is the single strongest behavioral predictor of the end of a marriage. Now, I want to be careful here because I'm not saying that a wife joke at a dinner party equals contempt. That would be an overreach. But what I'm trying to say is this: the wife joke and contempt exist on the same behavioral continuum. They share the same mechanism, and positioning one's partner as inferior, as a problem, as an object of ridicule rather than a person of respect. The joke is the lighter end of the continuum, but the direction matters, and habits built at the lighter end have a way of normalizing what comes next. There's one more thing worth naming. Contempt, in Gottman's framework, does not stay private, it leaks. It shows up in how partners speak about each other, how they speak to each other, and how they speak about each other to others. The public joke is not separate from the private relationship. It is one expression of the same underlying orientation. I want to end with something that might actually be useful rather than just uncomfortable. The research on humor in relationships is unambiguous that humor itself is not the enemy. A failure of humor that includes both partners that laugh with each other than at, that finds the absurdity of life together, is one of the strongest positive predictors of relationship satisfaction in the literature. Hall's meta-analysis showed large effect sizes for shared relational humor. Gottman's work consistently found that laughter and affection were markers of a stable, satisfying marriage. The question is never whether to be funny. It's what the joke is doing. Who is the target? What norm is it establishing in the room? And what is it encoding over time in the relationship itself? A simple diagnostic: if the joke would make your partner feel smaller if they heard it, and they will often hear it because they're usually right there, it's worth asking whether the laugh is worth what it costs. The research on this is not trying to make or take humor away from relationships. It's trying to point out that some forms of humor are doing the opposite of what we tell ourselves they're doing. They're not releasing tension. They're not showing confidence or ease. They're not harmless. They're communicating something about how we see the person we chose, and doing it in a room full of people who will draw their own conclusions. Relationships are built in small moments. Not just the fights, not just the repairs, but the habitual things we do without thinking. The quip, the eye roll, the joke at the dinner table that gets a laugh from the room and a quiet nothing from the person it was about. If any of this has given you something to think about, share it with someone you think should hear it. And subscribe if you want more of this. Thanks for watching.